All right, another totally rewarding chats, and we are going to head to the southern hemisphere today. Well, not really, because but knowledge about the southern hemisphere with Alberto Mondelli from Towers Watson today, and as always, Paul's joining me. He dressed up again in a different hoodie.
I keep showing up. I keep
Yeah, I
showing
really
up.
appreciate you wearing a different hoodie.
You're wearing a different T-shirt, man. So like,
I
let's be
know.
careful about throwing stones.
I'm a little highly concerned at some point in time, we're going to get to the number of episodes that, I'm going to have to, wear the same shirt again. And may we be lucky enough that someone notices or cares.
No, I
Um,
think you are expecting too much of our
yeah.
audience.
And so on the fashion side, I decided to invite Alberto because Alberto is high fashion, and I'll let you do your own intro in a second. Alberto, who is the senior director of Latin America for Towers Watson, or otherwise known as the guru of LATAM. And for the Americans that are on here, Latin America is more than one country. It's a series of countries. How are you, Alberto?
I'm excited to be here, and I'm really happy. We have started 2026 with the right foot, so
So
But you have to correct Sean already. Sean's already aging himself a bit by how he has referred to your firm. It is not Towers Watson.
it is not. It is Willis Towers Watson, and it has been for the last 7 or 8 years, by the way. 8, yes.
at my age, by the way, it's also the Sears Tower in Chicago, where I grew up. So you
We are
guys still
still
have it?
there. Our
Yeah.
office is still there, and it's actually now named the Willis Tower.
Yeah, but nobody
No,
says
no,
that.
not no. I'm refusing, is what I'm saying. Yeah, it's going to be the Sears Tower. As long, I mean, I'm going to call it that, and obviously, you can't even buy anything
Yeah.
at Sears.
It's
Even
it's been
even
the Sears Tower to my 7-year-old. It's actually been the
yeah.
Willis Tower longer than he's been alive, but he knows it's the Sears Tower.
And it will continue to be after Sears disappears, which will probably happen very soon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
I didn't even. To be honest, I think one of the first things I do after this is to Google and see if Sears is still around. I kind of assumed they were
Thought it was
already
already
gone.
gone.
I
Um,
think there are 4 stores still in the
oh,
U.S. And
cool.
Mexico, by the way. There is Sears in Mexico because the owner of Sears is now a Mexican guy.
What, this has
Didn't know
been
that
hot.
either.
This has been great trivia already. So I want you to go back through your background and talk about where you've been, the highlights, other than of course meeting me in Sao Paulo. That other than that, walk through the rest of your career and what you're doing now, and we'll jump in from there.
Yep. Well, it's been a long career. So I'm originally an engineer. And I'm originally from Venezuela. So being an engineer in Venezuela means I started my career working for the oil industry, but as an engineer, not in HR or comp or being on anything related. But I got bored pretty quickly, and I moved to consulting um, 30 some years ago.
You don't
So
have to say it. You don't have to say it. It's fine.
yeah, it doesn't. I know it doesn't seem like
No, I
I've
mean we
been
look
doing
at you and we're like, I can't believe you started consulting at 10, but I appreciate that.
But in some places you can start working at that age, even before. But anyway, I started doing consulting with Hay Group, which, as you know, is now part of Korn Ferry. So that was my first consulting job, and it was basically in Venezuela and the Andean region, Colombia, and Peru. So that's how I started doing compensation consulting and then data. I was in charge of the that data business and salary service and all that for a while. And then I decided to move to Mercer, and that was in the early 2000. Again, in that case, I started moving into leadership roles within the consulting business. And again, it started with Venezuela, then Colombia, the Andean region. And after a couple of years, I actually moved to Mexico for the first time, which is where I'm sitting today. And in Mexico, I took over my first regional Latin America business, and it was related to the data business, the salary survey business, and that's when Sean and I met. Because we worked together for a while as part of the global data business. I quickly got also the HR consulting business for Latin America, and after that I moved to Brazil. I lived in Brazil for 7 years. I was the head of Mercer for Brazil, and then for the Southern Cone, which included the offices in Argentina and Chile. And when I moved to Brazil, I was it was kind of my first real contact with benefits because I was in charge of not only the comp side of the business, but also pensions and health and benefits and pension administrations and everything else. So I would say I rounded out my knowledge of total rewards when I moved to Brazil. Then I decided to leave Mercer, and I came back to Mexico as a partner for KPMG in their People and Change business. I only lasted there 2 years, and I was approached by W2W 8 years ago, and I became the head of what we call integrated and global solutions for Latin America. So my team and I, we work with multinational clients in multinational projects, in multi-country projects related to compensation, benefits, mergers and acquisitions. But again, it has to be a multi-country project. If it is a project for just a single country, the consultants in that country would take care of that. So that's what I do every day. I work with multinational companies in everything related to comp and mergers and acquisitions, well-being, D&I when it was not a bad word, that kind of projects.
Okay. So that'll be great because I think what the things after we get to a couple speed round questions, we'll be talking about the differences in Latin America, and I think throwing in some of the the differences in a multinational, the struggles that, companies have in a multinational will be interesting because to be fair, almost all of our discussions around multinationals recently have been around EU PTD. And so they kind of go there. So it'd be a super cool perspective. So we have 5 quick questions. Well, depending how you answer them, because if they're wrong, then it might take longer. Are you a coffee or tea person?
Coffee all the time. And we are blessed in Latin America. We have very good beans in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. And we have access to good coffee. Not only good coffee, we actually know how to prepare good coffee, which is something that's one difference in Latin America to other places in the world that I will not mention.
No, look at Alberto throwing shade north of the border, right out of the gate.
Didn't take much.
Yeah. Your favorite vacation spot you've been to?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. I'll give you my top 3. I went to Japan 2 years ago, and Tokyo is just a beautiful city. And everything works well. I love it. I want to go back there. So Tokyo, then I'd say Firenze or Florence in Italy, also beautiful city, and I have Italian roots, so it's also part of, it's near and dear to my heart. And then Istanbul in Turkey. It's again the mix of cultures is just amazing. The food is amazing. Everything is amazing in that city. So those are my top 3 spots.
I'm taking notes. Although I will say I am lucky enough. I think. Well, actually, I wasn't going to. I'll change it so you think it's about you, Alberto. I'll be going to Florence in a couple of months. Just right now making plans. Now that you mentioned that.
Beautiful city.
If you have a weekend away, would you go to a posh resort or would you go camping in the middle of the woods?
I would probably try to go to the beach.
No.
No.
I like that. Would you choose A or B? C it
I'll
is.
have C.
Yeah.
Because A or B are not my top options. So
Okay. So you're a beach. So the
All
other
right, so now
the other forum is
you're
always
at the
the beach
beach. Where
or
are you
mountain.
sleeping? Where are you sleeping at the beach? Are you
Oh,
sleeping like in a tent? Are you sleeping,
I
in a
would
resort?
a hotel
Okay,
with
there we
good
go.
air conditioning.
Yeah, there.
If
yeah.
it has a good restaurant, even better.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. So
So
you're probably more aligned with Paul, who thinks a Marriott is camping, like a Fairfield Inn is camping. If you can find it on the beach, better. Okay.
that's right.
Yeah.
World Cup is coming. Do you have a team? Do you have what's your team this year?
You are making the wrong question to me. Venezuela is the only country in all Latin America that has never gone to a World Cup. So I should, since I don't have a
I'm going to use
national
that
team to
actually.
root for, right? I
This
don't have
year.
a national team to root for. I would try to root for several others. So Brazil, obviously, Argentina, even Colombia, Italy because of my origins. So what I usually say that in Venezuela, since we don't go to the World Cup, we win all the time because we celebrate if Spain wins, if Brazil wins, if Argentina wins, if Italy wins, and because also we had large populations of Italians and Spaniards in Venezuela. So not a specific team, but we always win.
That's unexpected but great answer.
I mean, why not, right?
And then the last one we always ask, so I'm curious how this goes. Are you a crunchy or creamy peanut butter person?
In Latin America, peanut butter is not something we would eat frequently. So if I had to eat it, it would be crunchy.
Okay.
But I would rather have caramel.
So I'm not gonna lie. I did have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, and never did it cross my mind to make that a caramel and peanut
In
butter.
Latin America, caramel, we don't call it caramel, we call it dulce de leche in Spanish or doce de leche in Portuguese. It's so good. And it's actually part of breakfast in some places or, mid-afternoon or kind of coffee or something. So, yeah.
Okay. Which leads really well into having differences. So I'm gonna just open it up for you to kind of wherever you want to start summarizing the differences in the markets, because I will say, I know you have done a lot of work with companies that are multinationals. You have counterparts that are in North America. I know I've, worked with you in North America, so you understand both markets. So start with kind of what do you see as the biggest differences, and if you want to throw in the similarities that people might not think is similar, that would be awesome as well.
Sure. So Latin America compensation and benefits market is defined as high protection, low base, right? So base salaries tend to be significantly lower than the US or Europe, but the region is unique for its extensive mandatory statutory benefits and now for its move towards personalization or hyper personalization of perks and benefits. So that would be my summary. If we get into specific details, when you talk about compensation in general, you could think that comp in Latin America, you would see typically savings between 40 and 70% in total employment costs because of the lower base salary, in even adding the additional costs that are related to Social Security and those mandatory benefits that I have already mentioned. So that would be a reasonable gap to have in mind if you're thinking about or comparing U.S. and Europe to salaries in Latin America. Now, this is a generalization. If you go to maybe Brazil, Mexico, and Chile are a little bit more expensive and are kind of premium hubs for talent. And then Colombia and Argentina tend to offer higher value for the same price or lower price. Although the market in Argentina is pretty complex and inflation tends to be really high, devaluation tends to be really high, and then you need to do a lot of salary administration, sometimes increases every 2 or 3 months to only try to keep up, not even to go beyond inflation, right? How would you like to actually receive an increase every 2 or 3 months, Sean and Paul? But that's reality. Venezuela is another market that has been working in that way pretty recently because of, again, high inflation. In terms of benefits, in the US, benefits tend to be more of a carrot to attract talent. In Latin America, they are more of a shield. They are mandated by law. And some of the benefits that are frequent and pretty standard in Latin America is the 13th or 14th salary or aguinaldo or Christmas bonus, right? In some places, it can go to 4 months of salary. So that's an additional cost that you should add to the base. Some countries also have a mandatory profit sharing, which is if you as a company produce a certain amount of profit, you should actually separate part of that profit, 10% of that profit, and distribute that profit amongst all the employees. And there are formulas in Mexico, for example, half of that amount you distribute equally amongst all employees, and the other half is proportional to the number of days that you work during the year, or proportional to your salary. There are usually caps so that the high salary people don't get all the money, but that's also pretty common. In Peru is also a practice, in Venezuela is also a practice. And then the severance laws. LATAM has very strict severance protections, and it can mean a lot of money for people that are dismissed with no fair cause, and for companies that's that's a liability that they have actually to take into account and put in their books, because eventually at the termination of the working relationship, you will need to pay for that, right? And then there are perks that are pretty frequent. Probably the two most frequent ones are food and meal vouchers that in other places may be considered perks. In Latin America, most people would take those for granted because it's pretty common in the market. And then in terms of benefits, the medical plans are pretty much everywhere and are paid by the companies, and also including dependents, which means your spouse and your kids below 25 years of age would be covered and paid for by the company. And it's probably related to the fact that Social Security healthcare is really bad in most places in the region. So a multinational company would be interested in providing this benefit so that their employees can actually have access to good healthcare. And that's also the same with life insurance, pretty common as a benefit. And the other benefit that is pretty significant and is well, and most people would like this benefit is the company car. This is a pretty good benefit, pretty frequent for at least the first and second level of the companies, but many times in places like Mexico, it can go to the third and fourth level, in addition to the sales force. So I would say those are the main differences that we see in the region. And in terms of what is similar, I would say since the market in general is dominated by multinational companies, you will see the policies being consistent. in terms of what are the benefits and how the comp is managed. Although there's a trend to localize, so it's not that I will give exactly the same level of benefits, but I will provide the benefit in a way that is competitive to the local market, and that would be the difference in among the what is equal, let's say.
So how, I mean, based on that and the other comments, how do you see multinationals harmonizing that? Do they, budget for a country and you kind of pick your menu of how you want to use to be locally competitive? How do you, because then of course in multinationals, the other problem, we have it more on a state or geo, and you see it in Europe. If you call somebody from Sao Paulo to Buenos Aires, like the pay and everything's different. Is that more, how does that get handled by the multinational to kind of harmonize that and manage it across the region?
Well, what we see frequently is the global framework and local flavor type of strategy. So you define global standards, and it's global minimum standards. It's one way companies, multinational companies, are managing this. So you define principles, universal principles that will apply in every operation that you have, such as, let's say, we pay at the 50th percentile of the market, or we provide medical coverage with some kind of standard, or we provide, I don't know, 15 days of PTO to everyone, unless the local laws and market mandates a higher one. But that's the minimum. So, but then you go to the local operation and you look at the local market. You need to be compliant with the local laws. You need to be compliant, and you need to understand how the different elements of compensation are affected by taxation, how you want to be competitive in that market, what 50th percentile means in that specific market. So again, global principles, global strategy, local flavor is what I would see most multinational companies do. Now, what all in related things, for example, you also tend to use technology that is, the same across the company, so that it allows you to make analysis that is also consistent, right? So you try to you tend, as a company, you tend to have like a single source of truth. It's the technology where you go to do all this analysis and do all the administration and see what's going on in different places, right? And then you tend to have a consistent job architecture that tends to be consistent. Although I have seen in my consulting life that consistency sometimes does not really is not flexible enough to allow for some difference that can be important at the local level. But what I have also seen is, with bands becoming broader, that has allowed for that flexibility. What other things that we see and do with multinational companies? Obviously, everything related to compliance and governance protocols. Those have to be very local. You need to have local experts helping you do that. And then you, as a company, as a headquarter, you probably want to do regular audits to see where how things are going. And one thing in Latin America that happens frequently is that there are changes in laws that that you actually need to be on top of, so that you don't become uncompliant with these new regulations. And then communication. I've seen companies investing a lot in total rewards communication, and going to actually the technology to help with that, and using portals that has been around for a while. Um, and I would say those are kind of the things that I see more frequently multinational companies doing to adapt to local realities.
Do you, I don't know, Paul, I don't want to monopolize. I'm very curious. Do you see Latin American headquarters multinationals acting different and having different problems than, a multinational based somewhere else, U.S. or somewhere else, working in Latin America? Because for those not watching, if you could see Paul and I's face, when you said like you're gonna get a car, we're like sweet, because that's like that just doesn't happen here, right? And so if there was a U.S. multinational doing business down there, and someone said, "Just want to let you know, everybody, in these three levels is getting a car," that would be interesting.
Look, yeah, obviously there are big global multinationals in Latin America. Some of, the biggest bread producer bakery in the world is a Mexican company, and I could name you others. But the thing is, what I see in Latin America, we call it multi-Latinas, by the way, multinationals whose headquarters are in Latin America. Um, Multi-Latinas, they tend to be less centralized than other multinational companies. Um, and you could say it's probably because of the fact that there are a lot less and we are less used to be headquarters. So we tend to actually let bigger operations or operations in bigger countries to actually have their own policies. Although what we have seen is the same that we have been discussing is okay, yeah, I will let you do your administration. I will not really be on top of that and on the details, but this is my global philosophy. This is my global strategy. These are my global minimum standards. Then you go and implement it in your place, and I'll let you do that. So that's a way to decentralize without providing full freedom and guaranteeing that that strategy and that should align with your culture is actually migrating to the other operations.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I found when I was in house, not consulting, sort of dealing with multi country things is quickly you have to have a clear philosophy or approach on like what is global, what's not. And that just can't live with you. Like you have to educate people on that, right? Because people don't just get up and move day to day between countries, but they can. And you want to be clear about like, well, what do we consider part of while you're in Brazil versus what is really attached to you or your role? And I don't mean that mechanically. I mean that more philosophically. And yeah, we're going to be local when we're local. And that's the way we run. And as a result, you're going to get some goodies that if you now move to Germany or if you move to the US, those goodies are going to be different. That 13th month check, that Christmas bonus goes away and now you get something different or you don't get something different. So like the clarity of philosophy, I think is a good point. Like what is sort of core to us and what is more, yeah, we get it. Like you want to hire somebody in Mexico, this is the way it's going to work. Like you kind of don't have a choice if you want to compete there for the right kind of talent.
We spent a lot of time, and so I'm curious on what's going on down there. I don't know because it's funny. I've been spending a lot of time reading on EU PTD, and I see and pay equity, and you got states that are now starting to do stuff. And so I won't lie, I have not spent a bunch of time on the pay equity piece there because the news is catching us on that side. What is kind of the pay equity environment down there, and is that being driven by European-based multinationals? Are they following suit to your point of having, because I could see where they have to have a minimum standard all of a sudden. Does Latin America follow suit or what are you seeing?
Um, there are some laws in Latin America, actually in some countries, that are, that have the same objective of the law in the EU. I would say the most important one is probably in Brazil, the one that has been enforced more about pay equity and pay transparency in some way. So yeah, Brazil is there, and it's not because of we're following Europe. It's because the market in Brazil has been going in that direction. But there are other markets. For example, Colombia is well known in the world as one of the places where gender parity is more advanced, and that has led to pay equity as a consequence, because there are more women in the workforce, and they tend to be paid comparably to their male peers. So it's not as big as an issue as it is in Europe nowadays. But as you said, some of the European multinational companies are bringing that because they need to be compliant not only in Europe, they need to be compliant worldwide. So they are bringing that to the region. But there are places, again, like Brazil and Colombia and Argentina, where this has been a trend for a while. Now, what I have seen also is, again, being consistent with the what we have been discussing, is a shift from offering exactly the same things to offering an equitable value. So instead of giving everyone $500 for wellness in all my operations in the world, I will adjust. I will have a wellness benefit, but I will adjust the amount depending on what you can buy with that in your
Yeah.
local market. So adjusting a little bit in terms of purchasing power, local purchasing power. So maybe you can go and buy a gym membership, and you want to make that affordable everywhere, right? But that will mean, I don't know, $500 in the US, but $100 in Brazil. You're providing the same benefit, but it will cost you different depending
Yeah.
on local purchasing power, right? The other thing that we're seeing in Latin America also is the difference between core benefits and choice.
Yeah.
We're seeing choice growing a lot, and when we say choice, it's a two-way street. Is choice through flexible benefits provided by the company, right, and paid for by the company, and voluntary benefits in which the company only acts as an aggregator of the
Yeah.
needs of their employees, and then they go to the market to get better conditions for those need to be fulfilled. But the company is not spending a single
Yeah.
cent to pay for those benefits.
Yeah. That always the core flex where there was, in mobility is one place where it was, but when you think about that, I'm always curious how that's going to work out in pay equity in particular, because if you talk about the value that's given, do you talk about the value to the employee, the value out on the open market? I chose this, but I didn't use it. And so as you go to compare like salaries for like salaries, and you're looking at 1 year total cash or total value, if we get to that point, it makes it very difficult to compare. If for nothing else, the administration is going to make it very difficult to compare over time. And of course, not all products and services change value at the same time, right? So it's going to look like you got an increase this year and went down last year. So I think it's really interesting that they're doing a lot of that. I guess the last question I had written down is, with I know there's a lot of legislative or statutory, down there. How do you see companies with all those rules and guidelines trying to differentiate on a competitive basis in the total rewards aspect between, or do they lean into other items like, culture or something else? But how do you see them? My recollection, which is now getting longer, is that there's a little less latitude on the base pay, like you mentioned. So how do they differentiate?
Well, I told you I started my career as a compensation consultant, and then I moved to benefits. When I was a comp consultant, I used to say that benefits were boring because they didn't change as frequently, etc. Right? And comp was where the real fun was. Today, I think completely the opposite. Maybe because I'm now more in the benefits than in comp. But what I see, the truth is, what I see in the market is companies are differentiating more through benefits than through salaries. because salaries, as you have said, it's when you have a lot of things that are limiting the way in which you manage your salary. You can differentiate and you can pay some of your people at a higher level, your top talent, your high potential, your high performers, etc. Right? But in general, that's not what we see. What we see is these people, in terms of comp, they actually grow faster because they grow faster in the structure, not because they get to be paid in a different pay line in the market, right? But we are seeing benefits becoming a high source of attraction in Latin America. So, for example, pension plan. Pension plan is not a frequent benefit in the region. Um, uh, if you take out Brazil and Mexico and a little bit Colombia, in no other places private pension plans are a thing in the market. But it's a big need in the whole market. I mean, the pension systems in the region will not ever allow you to have a decent pension to retire. So it's a big need. People are actually telling the companies that they need more help in general in financial well-being, but in particular in how to actually get to a retirement that is at least decent. So the companies that provide pension benefits are, hot commodity in the market. You would kill to go to these kind of companies. So in this case, retirement is offered and pension plans are offered, or other ways of savings. Because in Latin America, you have the pension plan, which is, for the end of your career, but you have it's called the Fondo de Ahorro. It's like a savings fund where you can actually save some money and the company will match what you're saving, and then you have access to that at the end of the year. So it's a way to save. There are other called like saving boxes or saving banks in which you can actually have access to loans. So again, companies that are providing financial well-being benefits are now very, very interesting for the talent. Not as much as the health plan, because 98% of the multinational companies are providing a private pension plan, private medical plan for their employees. So differentiation is coming through other benefits, well-being benefits. A lot of, the gym membership is a pretty good benefit in Latin America. The food vouchers, the grocery vouchers. So these other benefits actually make a little bit of a difference. And of course, we would be, if we didn't speak about remote work as you can call it a benefit or not, because it's a work model. It's a big thing in the region in terms of attraction and retention. It has been for a while. I mean, in Mexico, for example, many companies in the service industry, in the financial industry, they have short Fridays, and they have had short Fridays for a while. Now it makes less sense when people is not working from the office. But again, companies providing the work from office are very, very much more attractive to the talent. In Brazil, it's also the case, and in other places.
Now, if I take you said remote, and it was one of the questions on my list. Is I don't work with the biggest of the big companies. I tend to work with sort of the mid-sized companies here in the U.S. and to them, remote work has meant global work. And can I find great talent in another place that has a labor cost advantage? And Latin America has become, I would say, particularly attractive in the past few years because it's time zone aligned a lot better than traditional markets. But I don't really compete. Like if that's usually done through an employer of record or something different. Like I'm not directly hiring those people. And my perception is that almost commoditizes the benefits a bit, right? Because that local EOR is the one providing it. I'm not competing on this. I guess how are you seeing that trend play out? 'Cause it feels big in the segment that I work in a lot, but I don't know like to what extent does it translate from the perspective you're watching.
Well, it's an interesting trend in Latin America. It's um, going from the brain drain to the brain gain.
Hmm.
Because actually, we're not losing as much talent as we were in the past, because now they can actually work for these multinational companies
Sure.
without leaving their countries, right? And receiving a salary that is more than competitive for the local market,
Mhm.
while it is still half the cost of a comparable talent in the more developed countries. So what we have seen is kind of an invisible export, because we're not really exporting the people, but it's being exported because the talent is working for other places that are not their countries. So that's what we're seeing. The hire from anywhere. Companies can hire from anywhere. Sometimes through, as you said, third parties doing the administration. But then one thing that drives is the fact that the whole total rewards is almost reduced to a good salary, right? That is
Yeah.
very competitive. It's probably twice what you would make in the local market, but you will need to pay for your own perks and benefits,
Mhm.
right? But it's good enough so that you can actually do that and still be making more money than
Yeah.
in your local market. So that's what we're seeing, and that's pretty. I'd say Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Argentina are very large talent hubs because of the size of their talent markets,
Sure.
right? Brazil is, 180 million people, Mexico 120, Colombia 40, Argentina 50, 60. So and there's good education also, right? Um, so that's what companies are doing. Companies, and probably more on the technology industry.
Sure.
You see that more. They are just going to, find these people. Again, it's to me, it's a win-win. They get good talent for less money, and the talent gets better pay, and gets to work with a multinational company that could actually provide other opportunities for development.
Yeah.
That's great. Um, do you have any last thoughts? Because my other question for you to wrap in with anything we missed, because you were relying on me to ask questions, and that has holes in the logic. Is if you could fix any one thing automagically. I don't know how to say that in Portuguese. Automagically. Yeah.
Or in
If you,
Spanish.
yeah, or in Spanish. Yeah, I definitely not in Spanish. Um, what would you fix if you could fix one thing in the HR space? Wave a wand and have it be repaired.
Hmm.
I think the to me the probably the most pressing issue these days is that skills to work gap. The fact that we're still trying to manage our talent and our job architecture and our comp with, and to me, an outdated system that is based on whatever points or measurements that you use, and is not really flexible enough to recognize the fact that skills are the ones that you need to be paying, and the new skills are the ones that you actually need to be investing on. Uh,
No.
if I would have a magic wand to solve something, that is what I would try to solve, and then sell it as a consultant for $1 million.
Of course. My thing on skills, Alberto, has always been I think the technology and the data is there to pay for a skill. Like I think that's the and the gap. So this tech skill, especially tech skills, might be worth more than someone who doesn't have this tech skill.
Mm.
Fine. I don't think that's the fundamental problem with paying for skills yet. We haven't figured out how to unpay for skills, or the willingness, or in many cases, the legal ability to unpay for a
Hmm.
skill. So if I pay an extra, 20,000 reais because you pay, Python, and 2 years from now, as AI had happened a couple of years ago, writes Python better, and that skill is not worth 20,000 reais anymore. What do I do? Because now I have a problem. And so for me, the pay for skills,
Hmm.
both of us are of similar age, Alberto. Like, it's been talked about for a really, really long time. And I think for a long time, the problem was we couldn't do the maths. Like, you just
Yeah,
couldn't get a really good guess on how much a different skill was, especially a soft skill. I think we're getting closer there. But how you unpay, and the joke I usually say is I wrote Y2K software like nobody's business. When Y3K comes, I'm good. But for the 1,000 years in between, that skill does not have a lot of value.
exactly.
So to me, that's the thing with skills, I think. And I don't know how much statutory is, but I know there are statutory places around the world where you can't, reduce pay.
Well,
Um,
Latin America is one of those places.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
if you reduce pay, you're basically is a dismissal.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now how do you pay for skills without facing the ramifications of skills change, job
Yeah.
change? So that to me, like it is a magic wand thing. So I really like that you said that, because it is a cool thing to do, and it reduces like maybe jobs, like you actually perform this stuff and you get paid for that.
Yeah, I think just to answer that quickly, like I know one way to unpay for skills. You got to fire the worker. Like, and that's the unfortunate downside of that, right? Because
Exactly.
that's the like, we talk about tech skills, and I think that it's harder to talk about. You think about a manufacturing skill, like it's worth it to me if you can run a machine, right? Like I know what that's worth, but if I sell that machine, I don't need somebody to run it. Like that's the awkward reality of skills based pay is like
But
I'm
the
paying
interesting
for
thing
you to
is, it
create
can go like
value.
this. So if you
Yeah.
take the tech, but if you take that worker, right, in that case, you have to get rid of that machine because a new machine comes in, right?
If that's the assumption. But yes,
So,
correct.
so take the use case,
Yeah.
or a new software. If it's new, nobody has that skill.
Nobody knows how to do it, right?
So the question is now, is the baseline for that skill what that person had before? And then do you pay them more once they learn it because now it's a rare skill? Because like
Yeah.
this is my thing, is the unpaying, or maybe I should rephrase the unpaying. It should be the volatility of the value of that skill and the ability to adapt to the volatility of that skill.
Yeah. I think that's
Well, maybe the solution is not within the company, is on the gig economy, and then having agile way to actually use the gig talent to solve those issues.
But so this is the one that always, in my mind, this, the fun stuff, like it's in a gig economy. If the old machine was out and there's a new machine that's out in the market, nobody has that skill to go get. If you train it and you create a highly mobile gig economy worker, guess where they're going as soon as you train them, right? And the costs escalate because then of course the other person is not going to leave for that amount of money, and so it's such a cool problem. Like, we could
It is.
spend a session on it. It's such a cool problem. I definitely don't have the answer. I just think for me it's always the volatility in that market and skills coming and going. And we saw it with AI skills, and Python in particular, in my mind, was like, I always tell anybody, do you know ChatGPT? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, you can sling Python code like anybody else now. You have to debug it because it's not perfect. But
yeah.
anyway, I really appreciate you being on. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's always great to catch up. Trusting us with your time and sharing what's going on, especially in your role where you get to see all of Latin America, because we'd have to do a lot of episodes to do it.
Well, it's
Although if
been
we
my
did,
pleasure. It's been a nice conversation.
yeah,
I've
if we did a
enjoyed it.
lot of episodes, we'd have to force people to find them on a map, right? Because Americans in particular are not known for our geography skills, and so
Yeah,
talking
that's
about
why I
the
like to
region,
joke. Latin America is not one country, right? Just
right?
that we got to start with the typical American thing. It's not a country. Same with Europe. When every time, my pet peeve is more Europe, because
Yeah,
a lot of times they'll be like, in Europe, I'm like, which is a lot of countries,
lots of places. Yeah.
thing. Well, I really appreciate it. I look forward to catching up the next time. And we will, for those there, you can find Alberto online. at Willis Towers Watson. You can find him
Well
on
done.
LinkedIn. One of the best humans out there. So touch base if you have questions. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Alberto.
Yeah.